Fantastic. All right, well, welcome everybody. So today we're talking about root to fruit. So essentially how our core beliefs impact how we operate in our life. So what type of fruit does that produce in our life? What we believe and how that translates into our behavior and our actions, and then eventually in how it impacts our life, what we're producing in our life, how we're impacting others, interacting with others, how we interact with life can be greatly affected. So we'll get into that as well. So I just want to do the quick disclaimer like we did last time. So all these seminars within the season are designed to be open for everyone. And a big thank you to the Newtown United Methodist Church for sponsoring this financially, as well as with the Zoom to make this all possible, all the hard work from everyone on the team. And though it's sponsored by a church, it's open for everybody, and this is designed for everyone, regardless of your faith, beliefs. You might hear the word God in here or faith. A lot of times this will apply to anyone's faith or anyone's God. And if you don't necessarily have a faith in a specific religion or God, that's completely fine too. This will still apply and work within what you're going through, I hope, as well. And then keeping in mind that this is all therapeutic advice, it's not direct therapy. So these are generalities of truth. Not all of it may apply to you. So take it with some thought, really reflect on some of these things, pick the things that really apply to your life. And if certain things don't, that's okay too. That's just kind of a part of that process. Keeping in mind too, I'm going to use a case study today in order to work through and demonstrate how this works. It's an adapted model that uses cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as the root to fruit model, which has been edited quite a bit so that you can really apply it at home. And really, we're going to focus mostly on identifying what's going on in our beliefs, and then quickly how we can start to change that. Which will actually add on to some of the things that we talked about last week. But if you've missed any, that's okay too. You won't be left in the dark. Keeping in mind too that nothing is off limits, so we're gonna keep it real. So if you wanna ask questions in the chat as we go, I love the participation and interaction. Please keep in mind that we'll try and keep it as confidential as possible, so I'm not going to talk about names or anything like that. If you don't want anyone else to see that that's the question you asked, you can ask it directly to the host, and so then I will be the only one that sees it. Keeping in mind that in regards to the nothing off limits, we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We'll keep it family friendly, but also keeping in mind that we're talking about real issues and real topics, and it can get adult as well. I get paid to make people uncomfortable. So just keep that in mind as we go through here. And if you feel uncomfortable by anything, that's okay too. That might be something that you want to grow through or reflect on even after this. I definitely recommend too, if you find some beliefs that really impact you, to talk to somebody about it, somebody that you trust, preferably a mental health professional, but also a really great friend or family member can be a great place to even start. But to get really deep down, you may want to talk to someone who's trained in this. Keeping in mind any examples I use are fictitious. Identities and things have been changed, details. This case study is made up, but it does have a lot of truth in it. Pieces from different cases that I've worked on, others have worked on, real people's lives. So hopefully it really is impactful as we go through it and that you are able to connect. And that pretty much wraps up our disclaimer. And we'll be going every week, every Sunday at 7, and I'll give you more details about next week and the following weeks at the end. All right, so I'm gonna share. If anybody has any questions in regards to that, please feel free to let me know. Okay. And hello to all of you on Instagram Live as well. Thank you so much for joining. If you want some of the slides, just join the Zoom. Hopefully you have the link. I also posted it to the couple of you that are in here. So I'll be bouncing back and forth a little bit. So welcome to Root to Fruit. So I'd like to start off with an imagery of a tree. So at the top, we see the fruit that's being produced, the trunk in which nutrients are transferred back and forth is the action part. And then in our roots are the beliefs. These are our deep beliefs, core beliefs, things that come from within us and what we operate on. So fruits are the outcome, what we produce in our lives. They're often behavioral, they're patterns, they're my actions. They're also what I think, what I feel, and what I do to impact others. So if I'm having a lot of anxious thoughts, if I'm having a lot of anxious emotions, uncertainty, self-doubts, anything that's going on within me, more on the surface level, fears, the way that I act when I'm with others, the way that I act when I'm alone, are all based around this production or fruit. So it's what's visible to other people. Maybe our thoughts and emotions may not always be visible to others, but they're definitely visible to us. And a lot of the other aspects are visible to others as well. And so we have actions as well. So the trunk of our tree. So it's what I do. It's my behavior. It's me operating upon my belief system. It's also fed by my deep belief and some of my desires as well. So what my operating belief, I am X, so I do Y. So you can insert, I am good at my job, so I asked for a raise. Right. So part of my belief is that, you know, I'm pretty good at what I do. So I'm going to do an action. I'm going to ask for a raise, and some of the fruit takes place for me being bold. And then we have what I believe about, right? So what are my beliefs, my root beliefs? So what I believe about how I view myself. So that may include such aspects, for example, as, you know, I believe that I'm a fool. I might believe that I'm a failure or produce failure. I might also believe that I'm a really honest person, a loyal person. So there's a big facet of beliefs here. It can range. I can think I'm a fool and also think I'm a good person, for example. I can think I'm smart. A lot of worthy or value beliefs take place within the roots. So if I believe that I'm a valuable person or that I'm worthy of something or worthless, also beliefs are how I view others. So do I view others as trustworthy? Do I view others as kind, good, or evil? Maybe I view others as fake. Maybe I view others as a danger, something to really look after. A lot of these beliefs are fueled and formed in our early years and then reinforced upon by what takes place in our lives. As well as, you know, our parents, teachers, authority figures in our lives also help to influence our beliefs as we grow, as well as outcomes. You know, for example, if someone does like a public speaking event and they are greeted with really kindness and applause and encouragements, it's going to affect their beliefs versus if, you know, someone comes up after them and really harshly criticizes them, for example, it may affect their beliefs as they grow up. So also under beliefs are how I view the world or my world. So is it a just or unjust world? Is the world against me? Could it be for me? Do I trust the world, or is the world a very distrustful place? Is it a dangerous world, or do I view the world more as a safe place that people are inherently good or mean well, or are they just after things for themselves? These three views specifically really impact how we operate on a daily basis. If I believe the world is a dangerous place, I may be much more reserved, for example, versus if I thought the world was a safe place and a trustful place, I might be much more open, more willing to take risks. Another aspect of our beliefs is what I identify myself in. So often, what do people do when they go to a party? They go, hi, my name is, and I do this, right? Name, title. we often identify within our careers and jobs. So we really grow tightly with that identity, and oftentimes makes it really hard to move careers because we doubt ourselves, or we say to ourselves, well, what am I now? Also, our beliefs can be defined, right? So what is failure to you? Failure is just a stepping stone. In reality, failure means I took a risk. Failure is not an ending. For you, it might be, well, that's it. I'm done. I've messed up. I failed. I'm a failure. I can't do this anymore. Or maybe it's just a stepping stone. A lot of people will try something for the first time and feel like they failed and never attempt it again. I don't know about you, but the first time I played tennis, I wasn't very good at it. It took a lot of practice, a lot of failing, one might say. Failure, I tend to look at as climbing a mountain. If I trip and fall halfway up, I don't go, oh, well, you know what, I guess climbing mountains isn't for me. I'm a big failure at hiking. I'm just going to go home and never climb a mountain again. No, we typically get up, we dust ourselves off, and we keep going. And when we do keep going, we look at ourselves coming from a place of wisdom, understanding, and experience as we go up the rest of the mountain. We also, and that's typically how we handle tripping up a mountain or a failure. We wouldn't just go back to the bottom of the mountain and restart and have to do it perfectly the whole way up either. Beliefs also create desire and motivation within us. So if I desire to be great, or I desire to not fail, I put a lot of pressure on myself to do perfectly, right? So my belief is then affecting my action. So what's my fruit? Well, my fruit might be a lot of stress then. So I believe I have to be perfect. I have to get great grades. My action, therefore, is working really, really hard, maybe giving up things that I really believe are fun and that could take away from my self-care and my ability to enjoy what I'm doing in my life, and add a lot of anxiety, could add a lot of self-doubt. And lastly, asking, what are the gods in my life? So whether you believe in a God, the God, whatever, I use gods with a lowercase g in this case, because we all believe in something, whether it be faith, we listen to something, there's a voice in our head that we're serving. Maybe it is a parent's voice. It's all about a view of who or what affects our life. Maybe we're living up to an expectation, and that expectation becomes a God. We're working to serve this God and not fail it. Perhaps this God became the people around us. Well, we don't want to embarrass ourselves, or we want to control the way that we're viewed or perceived. So the people become what we're serving, essentially a God in this example. And that's what I mean by the word God or gods within this model. It will be ideally the thing that I'm serving at the moment. Potentially it's an idol, something that I'm sacrificing a piece of myself for temporary satisfaction, like alcohol, risky behavior, that sort of thing, toxic relationship, for example. So that's what I mean by the gods in my life. And we're going to start to define that as we go through as well. So any questions surrounding that, feel free to throw them in the chat. So next we have thoughts, emotions, desires, and behaviors. So I call this the four square. This is how a lot of what's inside of us interacts, especially in the fruit area. We have a lot of thoughts, we have a lot of emotions, we have desires, behaviors, and they inform our core beliefs. So what we're doing, what we're thinking, how we perceive, how someone responds to what we do also informs our core beliefs, and our core beliefs inform our thoughts, emotions, and desires. It's a two-way street, so to speak. So if I believe that I'm not a very valuable person, my thoughts are going to be in alignment with that, as well as when data surrounding me in my life tells me I'm not valuable. Maybe I wasn't invited to a party, or I was picked last for a sport, or the teacher didn't end up calling on me, or they did call on me and my answer wasn't quite right, and they just moved on and they didn't really reassure me. And now I'm like, oh, well, I shouldn't have even done this in the first place. Shouldn't have even taken that risk. And then I have all these self-doubt that reaffirms, maybe I think that I'm worthless, and that feeds that belief. It reinforces it. So I illuminate this, take a screenshot of it, take a picture of it with your phone. We're going to refer back to it as we go through the process. So I illuminate this as a frame of reference to even pay attention to what your thoughts, what your emotions are, what are your desires, and how do you then respond with your behaviors to help dive down and find out what are some of our beliefs and how then are those beliefs informing my thoughts. So we're going to do a case example. So this is Ashley. She's 50 years old. I know she looks great for 50. She's really rocking it. She's an elementary school teacher for 20 years. So maybe that's helped keep the youth. So I'm going to read this case study with you. In fact, what I'm going to do is I couldn't send it in the chat so that you guys could read along, but I put some of the bullet points up there for you guys. So now I'm going to read this case study for you guys and want you to keep in mind as we go along. In fact, I might, let's see here, maybe I can share this with you. Can you guys see the case study? Someone can just mention in the chat, just make sure they can see it. Yes, okay, perfect. Okay, so, all right, so Ashley, 50 years old. These are all some of my notes, so please excuse any spelling or grammatical things. Someone mentioned the bullet points are better. We'll go back to the bullet points, but for anybody who wants to read along as well, we'll do that just for the moment. So Ashley's an elementary school teacher. She has been for 20 years. She loves teaching, and it has been her passion for most of her life. She's worked hard to get that career. However, she's tired and burnt out from doing this job for 20 years, especially after the pandemic. And the virtual experience, has been really difficult on teachers, and she really wants a change. She's afraid to try something new because of how people might judge her, and she doesn't have a specific plan of action yet. What accelerated Ashley's urgency to make this transition was a false rumor that began circulating around the school that Ashley had hooked up with an administrator from the district to acquire her recent promotion. And now she's been treated like a pariah. Though in truth, she is completely loyal and devoted to her husband, and this rumor is completely false. Ashley is married and has a very supportive husband named Tim. He is willing and able to follow Ashley's dreams because she had done the same for him earlier in their marriage when Tim took a risky job position that was financially difficult for them for many years, but it finally paid off. Only a few years ago, though, they finally found stability in their monthly income. Ashley lives in the suburbs in a modest house, but has always dreamed of living in a loft apartment in Center City, Philly, or New York City in order to experience a new type of life and really get out there. Growing up, Ashley's mother was harsh and critical, not an emotionally supportive mother at all. While growing up, her mother would always say, "Dreams are for fools." Her mother wouldn't even allow Ashley to watch Disney movies growing up because those films were too focused on imagination. This is particularly why Ashley became a teacher. She wanted to inspire children at a young age to follow their dreams before the world or anybody else would tell them that they can't do something Ashley never had, someone to believe in them and show them how to hope and dream. So Ashley secretly is an extremely talented photographer. You name it, she does it. Weddings, landscape, nature, sports, national events. She has even been featured and published in a major title like National Geographic and New York Times. She even began booking her summer weekends with photographing weddings. Ashley has always loved photography. She began her passion in high school through a beloved after-school soccer coach. Coach Tom taught her how to use a darkroom, film, and digital media. They even began a photo club together her senior year. Ashley pursued this passion into college as her major, until thoughts of doubt entered her mind about consistent income and how it's hard to start a business. Ashley's mother referred to her photography dream as a pipe dream for the homeless because that's what she would be if she became a starving artist. So Ashley switched her major to teaching with a minor in business later in her freshman year. Heartbreaking. Ashley doubts her abilities, believes her dreams of living in a city are just romanticized, worries that she'll fail, make a fool of herself. People will laugh when she shares her dream plan with them, finds difficulty trusting friends with her dreams, and she worries that she's too old to start something new. Ashley often dreams and creates plans, but they've always collected dust in a drawer. So she's really not followed through with that. Okay, so let me switch back. Okay, so you guys can see the PowerPoint again? If someone can just say yes or no in the chat. Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So let's take a moment and just absorb that example case of Ashley. So her mom is pretty rough on her. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, just some of your initial thoughts about this case. Please feel free, send them in the chat. Maybe some prompts of what is she avoiding? Who do you think maybe she's serving? Who's that voice in her head? What would you recommend to Ashley if you were friends with her? And also, how could you encourage Ashley? Yeah, she's totally avoiding failure. Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Someone says I would encourage her to leave her job and try it out. I love that. If only she had a friend like you. Yeah, she could always go back to teaching, absolutely. She's playing it safe instead of going towards her passions and desires. Totally. Just think about how many times we end up doing that, right? Her God is her mom. What did her father think? Fantastic follow-up question. This case doesn't necessarily talk about her dad. I think that's a really excellent question to think about. What was her dad to her in her life? And it sounds like a lot of the thoughts from her mother are impacting her. Yeah, her worldview has been set by her mother. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, must be hard to, someone commented, must be hard to unhear those discouraging maternal comments. If her friends don't support her in her dreams, they're not good friends. Totally. Sounds like my parents, someone said, sounds like my parents when I wanted to start my own carpentry business. I finally had enough of the put downs and had a chip on my shoulder. I had the I will prove you wrong attitude. Good for you. That's awesome. That's fantastic. You're going to experience a little bit of that through Ashley's case for sure. Awesome. So keep coming in the comments with some of your thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear them. We're going to go to the next slide. I promise it's not blank for long. So just keeping in mind that there is going to be a lot on this slide. I know they say don't put a ton of bullet points on a slide. However, I threw that rule in the trash on this one because I think it's going to be really important to see it all on one screen, especially if you want to screenshot it. So there's going to be a lot of words, a lot of clutter. Hopefully you can follow along, but please feel free to interact along the way. So we're going to run through this model a bit. So keep in mind that tree as we go through. So fruit, action, and beliefs. So we want to start with the fruit. So what's being produced for Ashley right now in her world? Well, her thoughts are doubting of self. I should be able to. Maybe I'm starting too late. I know that was one of her major elements and fears that people might judge her. At 50, she has a great job, making good money. She's going to have the pension and the health care. They've just finally acquired some confidence and stability with their finances. Why would you give all that up? Someone might ask. So the in parentheses there, it says the should game. Well, I ought to do this, or I should do this. The shoulding all over myself. I should be this type of person, or I should wait, or I should jump for it. So we want to be careful of the shoulding all over ourselves. What are some of our emotions? Well, she's fearing the unknown. What could be brought on by tomorrow, of failing, being embarrassed, being a washed up teacher who turned photographer and has no clients. The worry and fear of that ambiguity of not knowing if she'll be successful or not, right? But we go back to this case study and already see that she's a great and talented photographer. It takes time sometimes to look at our data and say, well, what's really happening here? And that's kind of a key point. A lot of times in our lives, we have all this data that says, it makes things pretty obvious to the outside. However, we have these beliefs and this emotion that we believe over the truth of the data and stay stuck in it. So what is she doing behaviorally? She's staying frozen. She's avoiding. She's maybe distracting herself from her dreams and potentially self-medicating. Maybe she has a couple of glasses of wine every night just to numb what's taking place. The fact that she's giving up one of her dreams. And her motive is, well, I don't want to fail. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to disappoint her husband, disappoint herself, disappoint her mother. So we have some of the fruit, what's being produced. Perhaps her work is being affected because she's unhappy. Maybe she still loves teaching, but feels a piece of her is not being fulfilled. I think she's doing a great job of balancing the two, taking her summers and really embracing this dream and taking advantage of it, making it count, doing weddings and getting out there. It's hard to do during a school year, though. So our next step would be the question of, well, who am I? So how do I view myself? What's Ashley's internal image? So she might be asking or saying to herself, well, I'm a fool. I'm a fool for wanting this dream. I'm a fool for staying. Just a fool. My mom said I'm a fool. Maybe I'm a failure. I'm failing through life. I don't want to fail. I don't want to have that label. I think a big one here is I'm not enough, or I'm not good enough to quit my job in order to become a photographer full time. That's a lot of risk financially. It's a lot of risk in her life of, yeah, you can go back to being a teacher. However, that's not a guarantee. What might change in the time that she's away? Maybe not get into the same district, maybe lose some of the benefits that she would receive. One big self-doubt that I see a lot in my office is I'm too old. I started too late. It's amazing that my clients who are 16, 17, and 18 have the exact same questions that 50 and 60-year-olds are asking me. How do I fulfill my dreams? What do I want to do with my life? Did I make the right choice? The younger are saying, am I going to the right college or picking the right major? The older are saying, can I just change what I want to do? What are people going to think? Am I being an idiot for giving up money and security? And a lot of times we ask ourselves, well, I'm not important enough to fulfill my dream. Maybe it's just too late for me, and we'll just let it go. So we want to then move into further down into our beliefs, right? So we're already trying to figure out who I am. Now we want to look at, well, what has our God done for us? And you guys wonderfully called out in the comments that her mother is one of her gods. Her mother's voice and what she has perpetuated through how she's spoken to her daughter, to Ashley, how she's acted when Ashley has had dreams, how she's been discouraging and saying things like, it's a pipe dream and that you'll be homeless. Dreams are for fools. So what has her God done? Her God has betrayed her. As well as, we want to ask another question here is, how do we always know who our God might be? Because it might not be so clear cut. Maybe we have multiple in our life. So a little tool to be able to do that is, think about when you felt like X, who or what was involved. So when I felt like a fool, or I felt like I was a failure or not good enough, well, who was involved in that? Or what was involved in that? In those moments, maybe not even in the past recent time, maybe the past year, I started having these thoughts, but take some time and think back to your childhood. Maybe when you were 10, 7, somewhere in your teenage years, perhaps. Think about impactful times in your life. Typically, the first memory that you go to says a lot. If I say, what may have been some of your defining moments? What was a moment that you interacted with someone that was important to you? How did it go? A lot of times people will go to, when I was one of the actors in a school play, and I messed up my lines. Well, it could go either way. People could embrace me, or people could be upset with me and accost me, or verbally say negative things to me. Or they could say, I messed up my lines last night, you didn't even see. They can encourage them. They could say, hey, I loved your improv there. When is the last time when you felt like a fool? Who was there? Whose voice was it? Was it yours? So for Ashley, we can really go into, you guys nailed it with her mother. Also her coworkers. Her coworkers are being really distant and neglectful. They're not standing beside her. They're not pulling her aside to see how she's doing, even ask if maybe the rumor is true or not, trusting that she's a great person and that this is just a lie. No one's having her back necessarily, especially in this example. No one's had her back. She's eating lunch by herself. Her mother was neglectful, not encouraging her. Her friends have created isolation in her life. Everyone has been judging her. Really, the only saving grace is her husband, who's been encouraging and loving and says, whatever dream you want, we'll make it work. If we eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the next year, who cares? Let's make it happen. You did it for me. I want to do it for you. So the gods in her life that she's currently working on an expectation of is they make her earn her love. She has to prove herself, or she could be abandoned. This really fuels these beliefs that I'm not enough, and that my value system is what I produce is how much I'll be loved. It gets really complicated when I produce well and it doesn't translate in the way that I was expecting to. It creates a lot of upsetment and anxiety. If I have to prove myself for love by getting A+, well, what happens when I just get an A? Or what happens when I think I did the assignment perfectly and it still felt short because it missed a piece of what the professor was looking for? I might have done a great paper, but it didn't execute what the directions were. It's hard when we measure our value in that way. So we want to ask ourselves next is part of my behavior. So let's walk through this slowly. So let's start here with, what am I turning to? Right? What is my behavior? What am I seeking refuge in? And is it temporary relief? One thing is coping. If I'm feeling unsatisfied or neglected or abandoned, maybe I'm not following my dreams. I'm feeling like a failure. I may want to numb that. So a couple of just really obvious examples are alcohol, drugs, risky behavior, going out to the bar just for some attention and validation, posting pictures online so that I can hear words of affirmation and validation. Maybe I snap chat someone who, from school, or an ex, or someone who really doesn't have my best interest in mind or in their heart, and yet they tell me things that I really like to hear. So sometimes we do coping and it becomes maladaptive coping when it starts creating more problems than it's solving. So maybe a few glasses of wine on a Friday night really helps. However, if I'm drinking a lot of wine every single night, that might create some other problems. So what we want to do is really create new gods. And that tends to just happen over time. So perhaps we create a new god that we might have some control over. New gods are, I'm relying on a new god to teach me to treat me better than an old god did. So my new god might feel more in my control. I perceive them at least to be more in my control. Therefore, they're often more comforting. Yet we really can't control much beyond how I respond and how I act as my behavior. I am only really in control of what I do, not what other people think or do. So I don't really have control over these new gods. And right here we have an example of some of our new gods might be my own image. So instead of serving my mother, I'm now trying to serve how other people might view me. So I'm sacrificing some of my dreams so that other people don't think I'm a fool. I'm trying to do the best sermon or the best seminar so that people think that I have things put together or I'm doing a good job. Or I insert things to be a people pleaser or a pleaser other than staying true to what I think I should do. Another god of being good enough, right? Ashley doubts her abilities. Maybe she's saying, you know what, once I've had enough experience or my skills are at a certain level, then I can go and do this. Once I have enough clients, I can go and do this. Some of that actually makes sense. We don't want to just quit everything on a whim and haven't even bought a camera yet and just quit and start from scratch. It's a great idea to take some time and build and learn and then transfer over. That's being responsible. However, sometimes we rely on that and it becomes this perfectionistic aspect where these expectations are so much higher than what we really could just do normally. Maybe she expects to make more money over the summer than she would in her day job, and that will tell her it's time to switch, or maybe even burn herself out trying to do too many projects during the school year. A lot of times we'll put our new god in our identity if we start a new job, whatever we want to define our identity as at a time. Sometimes this actually works against some of the positive things that we have in our life. Sometimes when someone enters an AA or 12-step program, they identify as an alcoholic. So instead of saying I've struggled with alcoholism or that's something of my past, they're saying, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic. And that past, even 20 years sober, is still part of their identity. It still defines them. And they're a lot more than just an alcoholic. Right? We're a lot more than just our orientation or who we're attracted to or what we do for our job. Sometimes people put a new god as the amount of knowledge. Right? They have to know enough to start something. Right? I'll say, I don't know everything about psychology, yet I still feel like I can teach something anyway. A lot of times it'll be the American dream. I have to really jump in and do things a certain way and start a career a certain way and follow this plan. And you know, have to be the next Mark Cuban or Elon Musk. It's a lot of pressure. So we create this action cycle of relying on a God that I believe to be more in my control so that it'll treat me better than my old God. So in reality, I'm believing my feelings to be the truth rather than looking at the data and allowing what is actually true to fuel me, allowing the feelings to be the caboose. We also want to keep in mind that an idol or some of these gods is something that, or someone that we give up a small part of ourselves in exchange for a temporary gift. And that gift might be relief or satisfaction. Maybe it's a distraction or fulfillment. However, this fulfillment is temporary and we must go back again and again, except for each time it fills us less and it costs us more. So think of a Coke machine. I go back to the Coke machine and it was $1 the first time and I got a liter of Coca-Cola. And then the next time I go back and it's $1.25 and that bottle is not as full as it was before. And so the next time I go, I put $1.50 in, or $2.50, or maybe I put $3 in so that I get even more cola to make me feel better. Right? I'm still giving more and getting less as time goes on. So how can I actually change? So that's what we'll be addressing next. I want to turn to the chat real quick. What questions might you have regarding what we just went through? There was a lot of information here. I want to give us a second to just look it over, think about it for a moment. We already have a couple comments from the past section where she should still do little things to set herself up when she makes the transition. Like she could create a portfolio before she transfers over, getting her name out, make a website, devote free time to do the building blocks for a new career. What a great suggestion. If only she had that, a friend like you. Another person said those negative voices in her head are probably paralyzing her as far as taking action. Can her husband's positive voice prevail against all the others? What positive moves can she dare to make? It's a great question. How often in your life have you been encouraged to do something and potentially you avoided it or chickened out because you didn't believe what they said? You thought it was a really nice compliment, but you didn't absorb it. When's the last time that you really, truly absorbed a compliment from somebody? If we're not absorbing a compliment, that might be part of our belief system. That's great that you said that, but I don't really believe you. Or you're just being nice. How do I view others? Maybe others aren't trustworthy, so they're probably lying to me. So keep that in mind, especially in our own lives. If someone compliments me or encourages me and it just hits me like Teflon and just bounces off, might be speaking to some of our beliefs about ourselves. And as encouraging and supportive as somebody can be, it might not get through to us. We might not have the ability to absorb it. We may have built up walls in our life. And it starts with identifying what's going on and then action to make a change. So please, yeah, shout out any thoughts you might have with this slide, and then we'll go into some ways to change it. All right, so feel free to send out those questions or comments. I'm just going to jump to this next slide, but I'll jump to the chat as they come in. So I pulled a couple things from Ashley's case to look at here. So belief, action, and fruit. If we remember the tree over here in the right corner, the beliefs are the roots, the action, and then we have the fruit up here as well. So we start with the belief. I'm too old to switch careers. I'll never succeed anyway. I'm not good enough. My mother always told me I'd never make it as a photographer. Why should I even bother? So my action is I avoid and don't try anything new. So I serve the gods of my mother. Her voice becomes my reality. Her feelings, the way she makes me feel is so intense that I believe that that's true, no matter what anyone else tends to say. Even if I have all the building blocks and the data in front of my face that says, I'm an amazing photographer, I've been featured, I had a cover, I've been published. People are paying me over the summer to do this thing, and yet I still doubt myself. I'm still afraid of what other people are going to think. And so we look at the fruit of, this is affecting my feelings. I feel like a failure. I feel like a failure because I'm staying static and frozen. I feel like a failure for not taking this risk. I also feel like, what if I fail because I did take the risk? What are people going to think of me? How are people going to judge me? Maybe now I'm feeling lonely at my job and unfulfilled. And I'm thinking, well, I would never succeed anyway, so why should I even bother? It's tough. How often have you maybe found yourself in a situation like this? So the next step would be changing the order a little bit. What if we switch the order? We did a little Uno reverse card situation, and we put the action first. I look at the data in front of me. I trust those that I find trustworthy in my life. So Ashley's husband has been there and had her back, taking time and auditing my life of who's truly had my back. That's not saying that her husband is infallible. He might not have always said the perfect thing, or maybe he's undermined her accidentally or hurt her feelings. But when it really counts, he's been there for her. This might be somebody worth bouncing this idea off of. Again, working through with a therapist could be a great way to figure out, hey, is this time for me to make this switch? And what's holding me back? So I would encourage you to take a risk anyway. So the person who commented about the carpentry business also is the one that commented about starting small and working on the steps that would create a foundation for that transition. That's action right there. That's perfect, right? The fact that she's still doing pieces of her dream, the fact that she's shooting weddings during the summer, the fact that she's starting a website and a portfolio and really getting her name out there. In fact, she's in demand. That's data saying this might be real. And an aside, a quick digression is I'll have clients come in my office who are 50 or 60 and say, I know what I'm doing isn't what I want to be doing. However, I don't even know what my passion is. What do I do? And sometimes it's about risk in ambiguity. So just like Ashley, where there's going to be ambiguity on if she's going to be successful, someone who may not have a plan might have a lot more ambiguity and unknown to jump into and tolerate, which is okay too. In fact, I would give a lot of props to someone who just makes that jump, that leap, says, I'll figure it out as I go. They're really trusting in the support of their spouse. In Ashley's example, it would be breaking the chains of the past and breaking that old belief cycle that I'm not enough, or that my dreams are foolish, or that I'm a fool, that it's okay to take this risk, that we'll figure it out along the way. So her action could even be as major as quitting her teaching job and become a photographer full-time, or maybe it's I become a part-time teacher or a stand-in sub because I want to focus more time. Maybe it's baby steps, but it's action. She's operating under a new belief as if it was already true, even if it doesn't feel true yet. So some fruit that might come from that. Yeah, there's going to be fear, anxiety. There's going to be life changes. Maybe my income changes. Maybe what I think about myself changes as well. You might have the thought, I'm doing what I love finally, and I'm working for myself. I have freedom. I follow my dreams Maybe I'm serving my dreams a little bit more than that old voice of my mother that says I'm a fool. It's practicing this truth of just because something can happen doesn't mean it will happen. So just because the worst case scenario can happen and my brain's saying that's going to happen, that's the truth. Sometimes when we take that risk, we prove ourselves wrong. And the brain goes, oh, but that thing was supposed to happen. You're supposed to fail. You're supposed to be a fool. All of a sudden, I'm not. That's weird. It actually educates the mind faster than just thinking about it. Sometimes there's enough talking, and sometimes we just have to make that leap. So this new unexpected fruit or outcome teaches the brain. And finally, our belief. So the fruit informs our belief, and the belief informs our fruit. Right? Our thoughts, emotions, our behavior, they inform our core beliefs just like our beliefs inform them. And right now we're working on that matrix, is what it's called, of our thoughts and our action, and allowing the feelings to follow, which are impacting our beliefs. All of a sudden, I'm starting to believe like I have power over my life and my choices. Failure doesn't mean the end. A belief of my mother no longer has power over me in the way that she once had. I am not just my title or my skill level. I've seen in real life people do amazing things that were unqualified for. And it didn't mean that they had anything less to offer. It was just their moment to shine. It was their moment to share things. So this fruit is changing. It's beginning changing my beliefs. So we want to really mix things up a bit. Going from belief to action to fruit, we want to go action, looking at our fruit, and slowly changing our beliefs through what we're doing. The beliefs tend to be the caboose of our train instead of leading our train in that moment. That's how we start to produce that change. We want to keep in mind too that when we do this new cycle and we do these new actions, we want to be careful about what our beliefs are saying, even if things don't go the way that we expected or desired them to. So maybe Ashley quits her job, becomes a full-time photographer, is doing all this great work, and it's not working out quite as well as she thought it was. Maybe the first year is a little rough. She doesn't make as much, or she gets some bad reviews, or something goes horribly wrong. Maybe she gets sick, something like that. We want to be careful that our old beliefs aren't saying and beating us up as we go through this transition. We need to be kind and give ourselves grace as we go through this process. That just because some bad things happen or we stumble a little bit doesn't mean that all is not and all is canceled and everything fell apart and then I need to go back. It means that even our passions and dreams are not going to be a piece of cake. They're not going to be this, even the yellow brick road was not an easy path. The hiccups or waves are telling me that I'm going in the right direction. If I'm not facing some sort of adversity, that's a red flag. I should have some adversity. So this new pattern might remind you of something that I talked about last week as well, and about the fact, faith, and feeling. So I want to trust in the data, have faith in that data, and the feeling will follow. So take some action, let it bear some new fruit. Let it work on your beliefs. It takes time and reflection. Someone asked, what are good strategies for giving ourselves grace? It's a tough one. It starts with identification. When am I beating myself up? How do I beat myself up? What are my expectations of myself? Who is my God? And what does that God say? If Ashley talked about, her mother was calling her a fool. And every time I call myself a fool, every time I get a question wrong, or I don't get the job that I want, or the photography client, perhaps, oh man, right? Like she goes to to bid with a client or lunch to sell her product. So they would hire her to shoot their wedding and they choose someone else, or they just don't choose her. And she could walk away and say, I'm such a fool for doing this. Such a failure. Whose words are those? Are those her words? Or are those her mother's words, right? Identifying that moment and saying, I'm not a fool for trying. I'm a fool for not trying. It would be foolish to not try. It's taking the identity out of being the fool. Her identity is in being a jester. I'm a fool for trying. No, you're taking risks. You're not a jester. And so taking that time, taking some of the identity out of when we stumble can really help give us grace. When we take a step back and look at what is life telling us, what is the data saying? I'm not going to get every job. That would be ridiculous. If you got everything you ever wanted, that would be worrying. We're not meant to get everything that we ever wanted, or every job, or to shoot a wedding every weekend for Ashley. So to give us some grace is to take our identity out of these criticisms, first and foremost, and identify where these criticisms are coming from and take a step back from that. Say, is that my old belief or my new belief? I didn't get that one. That's okay. Failure doesn't mean the end. Is that even failure? No. Who has power over me? So taking that, I think, can really help give yourself grace by taking some of your identity out of what is being produced. So I'm going to jump for a moment and just talk about next week. And then I'd love to hear more of your questions. So feel free, send them in the chat if you want to formulate some of those. Someone even asked about how do you switch about relying on the new God? And we just covered some of that as well. So I appreciate that question as well. So I'm going to just mention, so next week, same time, same place, same link. We're going to be focusing on the part 1 of relationships. There'll be a part 2 the following week, but this week will be focusing on communication. It's really focusing on the foundational principles that support that healthy communication. We're going to be focusing on what is called emotional safety. We must first learn how to trust each other before we can really communicate with each other. And we're going to talk about how to build those skills, what that even looks like, how to trust, things of that nature. And we're just cooking along here, so feel free to take a screenshot as well. So these are some of the other seminars that we'll be having coming up as well. And the week after, we'll be building long-lasting relationships. So we'll be continuing to build that. Here's some of my social media. If you have your phone, you can switch to the camera app and scan either one of these codes to get more updates, other things that I'm working on, as well as posts. And I'd love to run into the Q&A. So thank you so much for being here with us this week. I hope to see you next week, that you come single, come with a spouse, come with someone you're married to or dating, or come stag. That's great too. This will be really open for, it's going to be focusing on romantic relationships, but even if you're single, it is really great information. And some of it can really be applied to familial relationships and friendships as well. So relationships are a big one. That's been one of the major things during this pandemic that have been affected. So we're really going to jump into that big time. So I want to thank you all for attending. So no pressure to stay for the Q&A, but you're more than welcome to. So I'm going to hang out for another couple minutes as questions come in, and hope to see you guys next week. Thank you so much for all your time here. I'll switch back to here as well if you guys want to take a look at that. So we have a question. What do you say to people who state, that's just who I am? They are unhappy and yet don't want to change? That's a great question. Even as a therapist, I run into that from time to time. People are just accepting of, this is who I am, or that's the way it is, and don't necessarily believe that there's change. And I think that really falls back into a concept of insight does not equal change. Just because somebody knows that smoking or chewing tobacco is really bad for them, how many people still smoke? And they might even go, oh, I really want to quit. That's partially an addictive process. However, that really translates into a lot of other elements as well. Sometimes you might even ask yourself, well, how does that, isn't that like affecting your spouse or your kids or the outcome of your life? The cost benefit analysis, the cost is astronomical for what they're getting off of the small thing. Sometimes it revolves into like a couple where one of the spouses will drink a lot and it makes the other spouse uncomfortable, or maybe it has to do with criticisms or different elements, and the cost is really high. And people say, you know, oh, well, you know, that's just the way it is. Well, people have to want to change. And so in response to that, if they're in your personal life, you can create healthy boundaries with them, saying, hey, you know, if you choose to, we'll use the drinking example. If you choose to get drunk tonight, I'm just not going to be home for that. If you can do that, of course. Or if you're going to drink like that, don't expect for us to hang out. I want to hang out with you when you're sober. Maybe it's a friend who drinks too much. Hey, I'd love to hang out with you during the day. You're not saying stop drinking or else we can't be friends. You're saying, I love you. I want to hang out with you when you're sober, right? Creating a boundary. Someone really doesn't want to change, you know, insight is really important. However, we have to have action in order to create that change. So identification of what's going on, as well as embracing and accepting that that is what is happening, and then a will and desire and action to then change it. If someone is being rude or unfaithful in a relationship repeatedly, and they keep saying sorry and don't do anything to change it, that's manipulation. It's the same thing over and over again with no change. It's the definition of insanity, expecting it to change, and the same thing keeps happening. So taking that time, you might need distance. If it's someone you really care about, you can still support them and encourage them in the things that they are doing. Maybe they're dealing with depression, and it's really hard to do anything different, or they're so set in their beliefs, or there's anxiety. And so encourage and positively reinforce the things that you think they're doing that are amazing, even if it's the smallest thing. I've had friends who are really depressed and they didn't want to try medication. They didn't want to see a therapist. So every time they got off the couch and did any little thing and told me about it, I made it sound like it was the best thing they could have ever done. And slowly but surely, that was encouragement that even if they only did one thing a day, that was really, really impactful for their life. So there are strategies. It just takes being a little creative for some of that, and taking a step back when we get really, really frustrated because something hasn't changed on their end. Perhaps our expectations are misaligned with what they're ready to do. Oh, thank you so much for the kind words, everyone. I appreciate that. Any other questions? And thank you to everyone on Instagram Live as well. Any questions on that end? Awesome. Well, it seems like the questions are wrapping up. So I want to thank you all for your time. I so appreciate devoting so much time on your Sunday night. Hopefully this impacted you guys. I hope to see you in the weeks to come as well. And I hope that you all have a wonderful night. I'm going to hang on here for a few minutes in case there's any other questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. And thank you all for your kind words. I appreciate that.